Welcome back to Philosophy and Ethics in Games, the series where I break down the stories in some of our favorite games and ask the tough questions to figure out what is right and what is wrong. I'm Josh Bearheart Hawk, and today we're keeping hope alive and discovering the true cost of loss in The Last of Us Part 1. In case you missed any of the previous episodes in the Philosophy and Ethics series, I've linked a playlist in the description below. As I continue to break down this and other games, I'll add new videos to the playlist so you can find them all in one place. As the last episode drew to a close, Joel and Ellie found themselves losing the only other pair of friendly people they'd come across in their journey. On the surface, the loss of Henry and Sam was a reminder of the brevity of life, and the fact that everything you think you know can change in an instant with no rhyme or reason. Sam getting bit was preventable in hindsight, but in the heat of the moment there was no way to know what was about to happen when they were attacked. It harkens back narratively to the moment when Joel and Ellie found out that Tess had been bitten, with the major change being the addition of Henry and the relationships involved. And that is actually a good point to focus on, because while the concept of Henry and Sam representing Joel and Ellie and acting as a reminder to both of them of what could happen if they aren't careful is a good one, the real highlight here is their individual feelings about the situation and what it means based on their prior experiences. We'll start with Joel, as he is the easiest to discuss. Seeing Henry take his own life in response to losing his brother reminds Joel of the feelings and thoughts that would have been going through his head at the moment that Sarah died. Henry was almost old enough to be, and was acting in the role of Sam's dad. And losing his younger brother, who he'd been protecting for likely years at that point, would be devastating in the same way that losing Sarah was for Joel. Obviously, Joel didn't end his own life, but the thought of doing so crossed his mind many times, with Tommy probably being the one person who was able to keep him from doing it. Fast forward to the present, and Joel is actually starting to kind of like Ellie, even at this early moment in the game. She reminds him partially of Sarah, and he's been fighting the instinct to see her as a surrogate daughter despite the experiences that they've shared on their journey west. Seeing Sam get bitten, and Henry shooting himself, reminded Joel of what caring about someone in that way means. You can't protect them forever, and sooner or later you're going to watch them die in your arms no matter how hard you try. So what's the point in forming that connection? In reality, those kind of losses are what make life worth living in the first place. In the moment, it's not an easy concept to grasp. When you're going through the pain of a loss, whether it's a child, sibling, spouse, parent, or friend, or any other close relationship, the only thing that you can focus on is how bad it hurts. You'll never get to see their smile light up a room again, never hear their voice on the other end of the phone again, never hold their hand or feel the warmth of their embrace. But the reason that loss hurts so much is because of the joy the person brought into your life when they were alive. Connection to others is one of the things that makes us human. We're a social species, and we thrive the most when we have close interpersonal relationships to lean into. In the modern world, people grieve in a variety of ways. Some seek solitude. Some look for an outlet like a hobby or work, and some go to therapy to come to grips with the loss that they experienced. In the end, most people wind up healing in the long term and forming new relationships naturally, though the timeline of what that looks like can be different. In Joel's case, he spent the better part of 20 years trying to forget about what happened, covering it up in his mind and refusing to even acknowledge the loss. There was some healing, despite his aversion to it, but there is also another issue that he has to overcome where Sarah is concerned. Guilt. Not just guilt for what happened, as it would be natural to blame himself for not doing more to protect her, but guilt for seeing Ellie as a potential surrogate for her. I can imagine him having nightmares where Sarah is asking him how he could have let her down and how she could be so easily replaced. This is because we tend to see new relationships as taking the place of the old, even when that isn't the case. Ellie isn't replacing Sarah. She is a completely different person with her own life and story, and it is possible to love more than one person as a child. Joel should really be looking at Ellie more as a sibling to Sarah rather than a new Sarah. This would mean opening up to Ellie and telling her all about his daughter, her likes, her personality, and her past, instead of closing down and ignoring her memory altogether. But Joel isn't the only one who has a plethora of complicated emotions where Henry and Sam are concerned, and to really dig into Ellie's feelings, we're going to have to go backward in time. About 3 weeks before Ellie came into Joel's life, she was a member of the Boston arm of Fedra. She'd been training for years, having been handed to Fedra shortly after being born. And while she wasn't thrilled about the prospect of being one of their soldiers, she didn't really have a lot of options. At some point, she became close friends with a girl named Riley, though Riley would eventually manage to escape and join the Fireflies. One night, while Ellie was fast asleep, Riley snuck back into the dorm that they used to share together and woke her friend up so they could have one last adventure before being separated forever, as Riley was being sent to some other city to help the Fireflies in their fight against whatever enemies they had. That is a major oversimplification of their story to say the least, but deeper dives into the characters is what the Friend or Foe series is for. The reason I bring Riley up in this context is because she and Ellie wind up hanging out at the mall, almost being typical teenagers in a way, and after what could have been one of the most fun nights of their lives, they both get bitten by infected. They have a short discussion about what to do, with Riley offering up a couple of options, and in the end, Riley succumbs to the bite while Ellie lives. This would be a special kind of hell for even the oldest, wisest, and most mature in the population. But Ellie has to go through it as a teenager, and somehow never really wavers on screen. See, when you lose someone in a tragic way like that, especially when you were also wounded, there's a psychological effect known as survivor's guilt that comes into play. It's the feeling of, why did they die while I lived? In the best of circumstances, this can lead to mental breakdowns and worse. But Ellie's situation is especially unique because the bite that she and Riley both suffered was, as far as they knew, 100% fatal to everyone. Ellie would have to not only question why she lived when Riley died, but she would also have to wonder why she was special enough to live when literally everyone else that she had seen bitten over the years died. And this brings us back to Sam. Ellie obviously didn't find out Sam had been bitten prior to him turning, but the effect would have been the same, as she would recognize the fact that yet another person fell victim to something that she was immune to. She'd seen it with Tess as well, but she and Sam had actually been getting along and were around the same age, meaning there was a connection there that was almost similar to what she had with Riley. That guilt would be magnified when Henry shot himself, as she knows there's a possibility of a cure inside her, and if they had only managed to get to the Fireflies sooner, they might have been able to save Sam and people like him, meaning Henry wouldn't have had to go through the pain of losing his brother. Those thoughts and emotions don't necessarily make logical sense, as there would have been nothing realistically that could have been done for Sam. But grief is seldom logical. Then there's the fear and worry that she would be feeling for Joel, as this is the second time on their journey that someone has been bitten during a wild yet routine moment. What would she do if Joel got bit next? He seems capable, but so did Tess, and even Henry and Sam. And that would bring her right back around to feeling guilty. How is it that she is immune when no one else is? Did she do something special to deserve immunity? Or is it maybe some kind of curse that she is living through where she has to watch everyone else die around her, forcing her into the solitude that Joel so readily embraced in his life? She mentioned to Sam the night before he died that her biggest fear was winding up alone, and being immune when everyone else wasn't could mean that fear would become a reality. What if she wasn't just immune to bites, but what if she couldn't die? That sounds crazy, but so does the suggestion that someone could become infected with cordyceps and not turn into a monster. she might be destined to wind up alone no matter what she does, with no way to escape. I'm reminded of a line from one of my favorite movies of all time, The Man from Earth. It's a story about a man who was born in the distant past, being a part of an early group of humans, but who wound up living into the modern day rather than dying at the end of what most would consider a natural life. The majority of the movie takes place inside his cabin, with him telling the story of his life to an incredulous group of his colleagues as they throw him a retirement party before he moves on to start another identity somewhere new. I would highly recommend checking it out if you get the chance. But there is a moment when one of the characters asks him if he might be a vampire, even an unknowing one, that siphons life from those around him in order to stay young. It's an interesting thought, and one that would be a bit difficult to prove or disprove, but I imagine Ellie might start to wonder about something similar if she lives long enough. To make matters even worse, she wouldn't be alone in that line of thinking, as everyone who knew that she was immune and who had lost someone to a bite would feel a level of animosity toward her and even jealousy. Some of that might even be a little warranted, as Fedra, for instance, shoots people who are infected as soon as they get bit. Ellie's immunity would raise questions about how many others might have been immune but had just not been allowed to survive long enough to find out. Just to summarize, because I know that's a lot, Ellie would feel sad about losing Sam, guilty because she's immune and he wasn't, and because she hadn't made it to the Fireflies in time to have a cure made to save him, and she would wonder about what it is that makes her special enough to be immune when so many others die from bites or are executed. But her immunity and the questions surrounding it will have to wait a bit, as Joel and Ellie finally reach their first real destination in their westward trip on the Oregon Trail. Arriving on the outskirts of Jackson, Wyoming, Joel and Ellie have to get around a dam before finally coming face to face with Joel's brother Tommy. I found it kind of funny the first time I came to this scene because Joel had mentioned earlier in the game that the last thing Tommy had said to him was that he never wanted to see him again. And then he actually comes out and hugs Joel as soon as he realizes who it is. That might be an example of growth on Tommy's part, or just the realization that he'd missed his brother despite the older man's shortcomings, but we don't have enough information on who Tommy was before to make that call. And before you comment and tell me that we have all kinds of lore and information from part 2 in the HBO show, I know those things exist, but we're taking this whole thing one video at a time. Not everyone has played the game or both parts, and not everyone has seen the show, so just be patient and try to practice self-control as we dig into the story here. Tommy has managed to do pretty well for himself, and he appears to be a sort of leader in a decent-sized community in the town of Jackson. They've managed to get the hydraulic dam working, and have been using it to provide electricity, though there's been some recent problems and it isn't doing so hot as Joel and Ellie arrive. Thankfully, Tommy's guys are able to get the plant back up and running, as he and Joel stop by to check on the progress, and it's actually really cool to see a scene like that in an apocalyptic game, as so many games, movies, and TV shows in this genre like to pretend that once society falls, it's just completely over. That's a topic I've addressed a few times, so I won't get too deep into it here. But I will say that this moment, and the later overview of Jackson in general, is where I really started to like The Last of Us as a story. It shows that even within the narrative of Joel and Ellie trying to find the Fireflies, there is more going on, and gives us the opening for a topic of conversation that will become vitally important in the finale of this series. Before we can get there, though, Joel and Tommy have a discussion about Ellie and her immunity to the cordyceps fungus, and Joel asks Tommy to take Ellie off his hands. A bandit attack winds up interrupting their conversation, but this overall moment, combined with another moment a few minutes later, really put Joel on my shit list. Going back to the earlier conversation about Joel and how he views Ellie, it's kind of understandable in a way that he would want to distance himself from her. He's scared of getting too close and going through what he went through with Sarah. But that isn't an excuse for treating Ellie as nothing more than a package to be delivered. No one should be that emotionally stinted, and Joel needs to grow up and start acting like an adult. The fact that he would spend so much time escorting Ellie across the country, traveling thousands of miles and overcoming hundreds of obstacles along the way, only to then want to abandon her at the first chance, frustrated me more than any game I've played in this series has managed to do. And that's actually a compliment to the writers here. I've picked apart several games at this point, and in most of them I've found gripes with the writing or the way that characters were portrayed in a poor light when it didn't make sense. But this game actually impressed me. I'm not mad at the writing, I'm mad at Joel, which is a testament to what The Last of Us has been able to do when it comes to character building. I actually like Ellie. I can relate to her and see flashes of my own daughters in her, the way that Joel can see flashes of Sarah. Because of that, it pisses me off to hear Joel trying to get away from her, because in my mind, I want to protect her and see her grow and thrive. The idea that this guy, who I've been ostensibly controlling but not making decisions for, would feel differently from me, would not be an extension of how I feel in this moment, is wild. He's lost any trace of humanity, or at least buried it deep within himself, and he's someone that I would imagine butting heads with if we met in the world of the game. And that feeling was only exacerbated when Joel and Ellie were reunited after the bandit attack, with her nearly hyperventilating to tell him what was going on in her mind and how scared she was. He seemed to show some concern for her, before turning around a few minutes later and telling her that he was leaving when they caught up with her at the farmhouse. Now, to be fair, Joel does have a lot of unfamiliar emotions floating around in his head. He actually cares about her and wants to see her safe. But at the same time, he also wants to disconnect and distance himself from her. He winds up sticking with her in the end, but the whiplash I got from his back and forth with her makes my neck hurt to this very day. One minute, he's concerned and showing it. The next, he's emotionally distant and ready to abandon her. Then, he's emotionally engaged but angry with her. And then, he's forgiving her and kind again. To complete the moment before we move on, Ellie steals a horse and Joel and Tommy have to track her down. They manage to locate her in an old farmhouse where Ellie once again shows how much more emotionally mature she is than Joel, as she tears into his emotional wall with several sticks of dynamite before dropping a nuke by telling him that she isn't Sarah.
What are you so afraid of? That I'm gonna end up like Sam? I can't get infected. I can take care of myself.
How many close calls have we had?
Well, we seem to be doing all right so far.
And now you'll be doing even better with Tommy.
Not her, you know.
What?
Maria told me about Sarah.
Ellie?
You are treading on some mighty thin ice here.
I'm sorry about your daughter, Joel, but I have lost people too.
You have no idea what loss is.
Everyone I have cared for has either died or left me. Everyone fucking except for you. So don't tell me that I would be safer with someone else, because the truth is I would just be more scared.
You're right. You're not my daughter. And I sure as hell ain't your dad.
I found myself nearly in tears as Ellie poured her heart out, only to have Joel stomp on it. And I wanted to slap him silly with the controller. Tommy bursts in just as the tension is at a crescendo, letting them know that there are yet more bandits to deal with. And after taking care of that problem, the group mounted their horses and headed back to Jackson. Thankfully, Joel isn't as thick as he seems, and the ride back gave him time to reconsider his plans. As they got to the hill overlooking the town, he ordered Ellie to dismount her horse and give it back to Tommy, so she and Joel could take the horse he was riding to the University of Eastern Colorado to meet up with the Fireflies. This action on its own isn't enough to make up for the harsh words he used with Ellie at the farm, or for his willingness to hand her off to Tommy, but it's a start. The only real saving grace here for Joel is that Ellie is smart enough to know that people will often spew hateful and mean words when they are angry, and she doesn't take what he said to heart, even as she would be justified for wanting to stay far away from him. The whole situation at the University of Eastern Colorado deserves a video of its own, but for the purposes of this video, there isn't a lot to focus on. The place is abandoned, with a few zombies and some monkeys running around, but there are no fireflies to be found because they fled at some point. Thankfully, an expositional doctor left behind a recording to let us know that the remaining fireflies from the university fled to Salt Lake City, and we would be heading there right away if not for yet another group of raiders showing up to try and kill us, and I'm starting to wonder if these guys are tracking us via GPS. This might not be super important at the moment, but just keep in mind for next week that the raiders shot first. The encounter might not really stand out as anything other than just another fight, if not for Joel making the single biggest mistake of his life and reaching for a door handle. A raider exploded through the door before Joel could open it, and as he attacked, he pushed both himself and Joel through a railing and onto the floor 20 feet below, where Joel was impaled on a piece of rebar to wait for next week's Philosophy and Ethics finale of The Last of Us Part 1. To make sure you don't miss out on that, hit the like button on this video and subscribe to Lost in Games on YouTube. I release new Philosophy and Ethics in Games videos every Thursday, as well as other series like Friend or Foe, where we pick apart the characters in games to determine if they would be someone you would want in your group or not, and Unscripted, where I talk about how stories in games, movies, TV shows, books, and more could be improved. If you want to help the channel out in other ways, I've got channel memberships here on YouTube, a Patreon, and a membership program on my website. Joining any of those gets your name on the screen in videos, while helping me to avoid taking sponsorships and continue making great breakdowns like this. That's all I've got for now. I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.